Hi, everyone. So we have a special guest here, our beloved Joyce Meng. Definitely check out her channel. She has a lot of incredible interviews. She's built such a wonderful community in the MBTI world. And in this video, what we're doing, and also my next video on this channel, we're going to talk about the 8 functions of the INFJ. And we're going to be using a website, which is called the World Socionics Society. It has these wonderful, beautiful, like nuanced and rich descriptions of all the different functions of every type, all 8 of them, and see what things may apply and what things may not apply. So great to have you on the show, Joyce.
It's nice to be on your channel, always.
Excellent. Okay, so let's get started here. Oh, before I move on, I want to let you know I'm going to have a video on my other channel, and Joyce is going to talk about something that is really neat, and she's going to talk about relationships and what we seek for in relationships. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Joyce?
Absolutely. And so I believe that human beings have 2 very fundamental needs. And the first one is to be seen, that we are accepted and understood for who we are. And the second need is to be challenged. And so to have somewhere that grows you as a human being.
Right.
And when those needs aren't met, we can develop neuroses or certain pathologies from that. And so I think a lot.
So I'm gonna have to stop you here because Joyce is gonna have a lot of once she starts talking, she's gonna bring a lot of rich and really interesting material. And so I want her to save it for that video. So let's get started here. Okay, so in socionics, the INFJ is referred to as the IEI, the Intuitive Ethical Integrator. This is the mystic, and you're going to see the familiar functional patterns of the INFJ here. But let's start with the description of introverted intuition, which is called time. So this is what this website has to say about introverted intuition. So INFJs can be characterized by continuous search for meaning and purpose in their lives and in the world in general, with a tendency to detach from daily affairs. They enter a state of deep self-reflection, looking back through their recollections and looking ahead to probable future, which they feel humanity is headed towards. So how do you feel about that statement, Joyce, in its relation to the INFJ?
I think socionics has one of the most accurate definitions of introverted intuition out there. So calling it time is beautiful because it's really looking at meaning, but extroverted sensing is also attached to introverted intuition. So they're actually looking at like the real world in real time and then seeing that how it plays out across time. And so it's patterns that have the trajectory played out over time. And so there is this continual search for meaning, for purpose. And because of that, you can detach from daily affairs because they may not feel as important in the big picture scheme of it all. Right. And so seeing that probable future that humanity is working towards, that's very interesting because analyzing the psychology of things or the emotional depth of things and then seeing how that plays forward in people in the future is more interesting or than just everyday Monday life. And so there is this tendency to detach from the everyday grind and to want to have something, a greater calling to aspire towards.
Wonderful. It's like you're extracting the significance behind things, like looking at what is truly valuable to look at in terms of finding the meaning of it all. INFJs tend to be to possess a dissatisfaction with the superficiality of daily existence. Instead, believing, as you mentioned before, right, a bit, instead believing in some greater calling that must be connected with and understood before being ultimately accepted. Frequently, they're disposed towards the wanderings of their imagination, running memories through their mind again and again to fathom the steps of their personal journey. They may also try to look ahead and envision a shared utopia for themselves and those they identify with. So can you tell me how you resonate with that?
Yeah, there is a shared utopia or an ideal for
Hmm.
existence and for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of notice when the world isn't living up to what it could potentially be.
Mm-hmm.
And you're more focused on the potential of a thing or the possibility or the what things will be than the actual thing itself. It's more interesting to think about how things could be
Mm-hmm.
improved or how things
Mm-hmm.
could be different from how they are rather than the thing itself. It's not as interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
there's this level of idealism or philosophizing of
Mm-hmm.
reality too.
It sounds like INFJs care about where humanity is headed. So can you tell us why is this important to you?
Because it defines it. Where it's headed is its future, an inevitable fate. If you knew the Titanic was going to crash into the iceberg,
Mm-hmm.
and that's important because it tells you about the end vision or the end state of how that thing's going to turn out. And so you
Hmm.
don't want it to be a bad end. You want it to be a
Right.
good end. And so it feels like an important thing to think about.
Right. It sounds like you are trying to protect others.
Yeah. And I also want their life and my life and the world to have some sort of meaning beyond just living and existing.
Right. So these people would appreciate that sense of deeper meaning found within themselves. This continuous search results in a tendency of these types to philosophize on the reason of our existence, why we're here, and what everything is leading up to. The focus on a single teleological end directs much of their behavior, with them having a strong but often indescribable feeling of how significant events of the present might help shape future developments. Similarly, they will often place their actions in terms of their role in the bigger picture, adjusting their behavior in a way that serves meaningful ends.
It's important to know the bigger picture of what you're working towards
Mm-hmm.
because there is a desire to want to do something meaningful, right? You want to be the steward of something that's
Mm.
worthwhile. And so just doing things but not knowing why it particularly means something, it can feel empty. And it's like if you do that too
Mm-hmm.
long, you start to get into this nihilistic zone where it's like if everything you do, you can't link it back to why you're doing it, then how do you know it's not pointless?
All right.
And so there is
Mm-hmm.
this desire for things to add up to an end in which you you are striving towards. You don't
Mm-hmm.
want to live a meaningless life and not know it.
Right. So I imagine like every personality type here and then they kind of could feel this emptiness. And what the INFJ is trying to do is kind of like tie everything together for them. When do you notice this tendency? Because it sounds like this sounds like a lot to be able to think about the bigger picture of things and see where things are headed. When did that start for you?
As long as I could think,
Hmm.
yeah, my first ever ability to conceptualize or even like have words, like say words, was when I noticed my parents were fighting, and I was like, this is such a useless drama. And down the road, you guys are going to hate each other over these small things that are building up over time. So I noticed little micro aggressions,
Hmm.
micro dramas that people have
Hmm.
that ultimately cause their relationships to fail. And so, like, I notice relational trajectories where people's emotional trajectories are going or where their humanness is going and how that will play out over time, what it
Hmm.
will lead up to. And that's always been something that's been very intrinsic to just me perceiving the world.
Hmm.
I notice that when a person's actions lead them towards a type of life they may not want. And I'm like, oh no. And you don't want to be one of those people. So you see people, they oftentimes play into these little things. Like they accumulate these little micro cuts or micro resentments over time, and then they start to build lives that they don't want. And so
Mhm.
I don't want to be a person who does micro actions that eventually lead up to the end picture that I wouldn't actually want. I
Mhm.
don't want to create a fate and not know that I'm doing it in a way that doesn't feel like it's a beautiful fate. I don't know.
Right.
All your
Yes.
actions lead towards an end, whether you are conscious of it or unconscious of it.
Right.
And so I just want to be more aware in my life.
There's like a sense of responsibility behind this.
Yeah. And mhm.
Yeah. And so you could really see how the patterns unfold in others, and you're really like looking deep within their soul to see like how these patterns affect them at a deeper level, and you want to be able to inform them about it so that they're able to kind of like change their dance if it's not something that's serving them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so maybe I read this part similarly. They will often place their actions in terms of the role of the bigger picture, as you mentioned. And I think I mentioned that. At each point, the journey is set out, and the INFJ seeks to influence themselves and others into staying on track. Often, such approach results in a vague knowing of the importance or urgency of a moment and its relation to the future developments. This allows them to know not just when it's urgent to act, but also when an outcome, whether desired or not, is inevitable. So this is like when the SE starts to kick in. It's like it's time for action.
Yeah. There's this window of opportunity where if you miss it, then you may not get the certain kind of result that you want. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a vague knowing of an urgency or the importance of the SE moment. Because if you miss that time frame, then you may affect the future development entirely.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool. It sounds like you live in a time machine or something.
Yeah, or a sensory deprivation tank.
Yes. A sensory deprivation tank in a time machine. So let's go on to the next function. So we have extrovert feeling here, which Socionics called emotions. So usually the INFJ tends to focus on the interpersonal, creating the sense of not only their personal fate, but also a shared narrative for others to feel part of. Frequently, they will seek to express their insights to people, often through some art form, such as music or writing, or through some political or humanitarian outlet. Often there is an alternative dark or gothic feel to such an expression, providing a sense of fantastical, but which to them feels more real than the cheesy cliche.
There is this desire to have a humanitarian outlet to express your insight to other human beings.
Mm.
And yeah, there can be a desire to express more fantastical parts of yourself or just have life feel more like a beautiful thing rather than whatever it seems like on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Like to
yeah,
prevent it from being too dry. There's like a richness, and it's not just at a meaningful level, but at that emotional level, you're probably providing a level of emotional richness.
absolutely.
How about like in terms of music or writing? Like not necessarily every INFJ is like an artist of sorts.
Yeah, I guess it depends on their outlet.
Mm-hmm.
I think with NF types or even with FI types, you'll have them writing in a way that's very poetic
Mm-hmm.
because they'll have this humanness infused into it and this richness of unpacking the experience of what it's like to go through certain things, but then connecting it to what does this really mean about our existence for us as people? And it gets you to either look into your own self-awareness more or look into how you can think through things in a more clear way, but also how you can bridge emotions with thinking. And so it's like a
Mm-hmm.
holistic or it's fully it's a fully embodied or it's a very philosophical dive into the experience of this world or even beyond this world. So it's almost getting people to see the world in a different way. And in a sense, it is art because it is getting you to reimagine the world.
Yeah, so it's kind of shifting out of the cliche or the regular patterns of viewing things. So we have like a different angle by which to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and therefore providing a certain kind of richness, being exposed to how it's like to live as a human being and to have the human experience. Do you feel like part of you is alternative, dark, or gothic?
I mean, there was a stage, yes, I could identify with that. I think it's also an Enneagram 4 thing too. So I think they would relate to a more emotional aesthetic or a more unconventional, individualistic way of looking too.
Right. And how about like for the INFJs who may not be 4s?
That's a good question. They might be a different version than this profile because this profile looks like an INFJ Enneagram 4 profile.
Right. Through such approaches, they seek to inspire others and will derive a strong sense of belonging and identification with those groups and congregations who openly support them in their endeavors. They look ahead to future goals and higher causes, and as such, they want to persuade others to join in with achieving these goals. To this end, they can motivate and encourage others with romanticized language, being better conveying in the specialness and importance of such developments and making people want to assist. So this kind of tapping more into your ENFJ side.
INFJs, they can take pleasure in masterminding a group towards future goals or higher causes. And so I could see that.
How the INTJ of the people feely realm.
They could be, yeah. Dario Nardi calls it analytical extroverted feeling. And so this type of extroverted feeling is more getting people to feel the right way.
Right.
And so that's what Socionics FE looks like a lot.
And why do you feel as an INFJ driven to do this?
Because it's getting everyone on the same page. And when you do that, then there's a cohesion with you're not only on this purposeful path, but you're also helping people steward them or guide them or direct them towards something that could ultimately matter to them too.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of meaning in being able to do things as a group, to have teamwork and work on something together. Okay. This is not to say that all INFJs are very expressive of their emotional states in conversation, as many could be solemn or taciturn. However, when speaking or writing, the poetic use of language can give them away. Furthermore, they tend to be socially diplomatic and subtly charismatic, adapting themselves to the interlocutor in conversation, even mirroring their needs. In this way, they could be very likable, often given the impression that they are on the side of whoever they're talking to and find the right thing to say that stimulates passion without causing offense.
Yeah, I think INFJs can look like they're on the side of whoever they're talking to, which is why they get the chameleon reputation too.
Right.
And the mirroring and being able to adjust themselves to people makes them excellent with diplomacy. And it can cause a subtle charisma that you talked about because they're able to change themselves in a way where the other person feels heard and understood. And when people know that you like them, that's when they listen to you. And so INFJs can persuade people in an often way that people don't always know that it's happening because it can be so behind the scenes.
This approach rarely stands out in public settings, but is rather more subtle and supportive than dominant, allowing them to operate smoothly in the background of community and make no enemies, often surviving any major social upheavals. Rather than drive the group conversation, they will likely focus on the individuals, looking to draw them back into the fold. And they do this well by looking ahead to see the social consequences, having a good idea how to mediate and mitigate likely conflicts that will cause a schism in a group or prevent the greater goal from being achieved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with social consequences, I think that's a really obvious thing that extroverted feeling notices.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the reasons for the diplomacy too, because you don't want to get people in a space where now you have to clean up whatever upset that's been caused. You want to prevent the big conflict from happening before it happens.
Right.
Unless there's a bigger picture at stake, then you might be willing to create some social consequences for the bigger thing that you're fighting for. Also, I might need to close my Facebook. One moment, that might be me going like beep beep. Yes, it is. I have closed it effectively. Thank you.
Yay!
For my disruptive behavior.
Is your ESCP coming out again?
Time to jump out of a plane.
Yes. So what I hear is like, I really hear that it's like you really, really do think ahead, and then like really see that bigger picture. So like there's that Titanic thing again, and the iceberg thing, but you also look deeper than that picture itself of the oncoming danger. It's like what's like the overall trajectory that would allow for like the greater sense of meaning for everyone involved.
Yeah, you bang on.
Like the ship against the iceberg.
That too.
Excellent. So now it takes an interesting turn here because we're going to cover all 8 of the functions here, but we're actually going to go into introverted sensing here, which sociologists calls senses. So to an extent, INFJs could be in tune with the needs of their body and tend to look after themselves well, cultivating good aesthetic, eating well, dressing appropriately, and in general, managing to make themselves appear welcoming and appeasing to others. Due to tendency towards self-reflection, they don't tend to place many demands on their bodies, allowing them to stay in good physical state.
I mean, I'd like to know that I look pretty. I mean, that's confirmation. Thank you, Socionics. On a serious note, yeah, I think dressing appropriately and wanting to make sure you provide a good experience to the people around you and to be welcoming is something that is important.
Right. So it's kind of like INFJ in ISFJ mode.
Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to know if it's an INFJ or an ISFJ if you don't talk to them.
They may be able to relax and enjoy the moment in the company of others. They tend to be naturally diplomatic and be able to soothe tensions between people in the moments should they feel the conflict is petty or not serving the greater goal. And kind of talked a bit about that. However, they may just as easily cause conflict if they feel the peace of the environment is bringing stagnancy and a lack of meaningful development.
I mean, if creating the most ideal situation between people means being able to also bring a little bit of change and maybe a little discomfort, that is possible too.
So how does that look like?
It's sometimes letting people know that, you know, they could be doing things in a way where it doesn't have to be the way that they're doing it now. So a truth bomb, or being able to be a little bit confrontational with people's patterns with them. But then also being able to smooth it over afterwards too.
Right. Because here's talking about introverted sensing, but this is where the extroverted sensing kind of comes in. Like almost like, you know, INTJs and INFJs kind of do a bit of this lightning zap to be able to speak their truth.
Every once in a while, we interact with the world to help change things. Of course.
Okay. So furthermore, the imagined, remembered, or predicted worlds of the INFJ could be could be filled with physical and aesthetic beauty, often a slightly ethereal or unnerving nature in contrast with the dullness of present existence. However, at heart, they're aesthetics and do not see much value in the simplicity of the day-to-day. They're fundamentally dissatisfied with the world as it currently is, yearning for something more profound to give themselves to. Relaxation is often anathema to fulfilling higher goals, and they may look to artistic states of suffering as being more preferable for this reason.
Yeah, there is this dissatisfaction with the world as it really is right now, because you're restless as you can see a better world. And so oftentimes there is, because they're vision focused, they might be able to appear a little slightly ethereal or mysterious, or focused on something else, like not the things in front of them, but yearning for something more profound. Which is why some INFJs might give themselves to their relationships, as that feels more profound than day-to-day life.
Yeah, and even if there's like that bit of like a discomfort, right?
Yeah. And sometimes it can even result in detachment too. So a lot of INFJs can be more detached than you would expect them to be.
Can you explain that a bit?
Because they don't really feel like they're operating in a day-to-day basis with the world all the time, or they don't find that interesting. They're focused on matters that are a little bit more global, or something that is more theoretical or conceptual. They're taking almost a bird's eye view or a third person perspective on the experience of life. And so that can make them even look a little bit more detached, because they're not thinking about it in the nitty-gritty details of life, but if you zoom out the infinite degree, what patterns are you seeing playing out?
I see. They will see daily tasks as mundane and pointless, as you mentioned here, unless it serves some higher purpose, as you mentioned here, lacking the crucial elements that contribute to the big picture. As a result, they prefer not to indulge in such distractions, instead needing to relate it in some way to their purpose. You're using your NI to have predicted the rest of this description.
Exactly. I just wanted to take away your job from reading this.
No. I want to read. INFJs instead seek out environments of exciting, more intense activity, where under great pressure, action needs to be taken with no time for leisurely delay. By doing so, they're able to feel they're getting somewhere rather than stuck in the lazy temptations of the present. What are your thoughts on that?
It seems like being stuck doing nothing is not pleasant, because it feels like you're not building up to anything of purpose.
Right.
Sometimes it's nice to go out and seek some time sensitive activities too.
Right. My thoughts, I have a question, because it says in the beginning that INFJs do not place many demands on their bodies.
Yeah, I was like, there's an interesting paradox there.
Well, I imagine there's some sort of movement of energy, because often like people start off kind of not being very much their fourth function at all, but then they kind of move towards that direction over time.
Yeah, there's a love-hate relationship with it. It's aspirational.
Right. Do you remember these times of great action? Like we were talking right before this interview, that you jumping out of a plane, for instance.
Yeah,
spinning your car in many circles, and all sorts of crazy shenanigans.
Yeah, it's a miracle I'm alive right now.
You don't need a body to be alive, though. You're INFJ. And then the last one we're going to talk about today, and in another video we'll get to the other 4 functions. We'll talk about expert thinking, which is called pragmatism. So INFJs are given to heartfelt deliveries on their musings and thoughts. Such an approach is not well suited to demands for hard empirical evidence. As such, the narratives given by them can come across as mystical and lacking in factual accuracy or any clear grounding. When they have no clear vision for what is going to happen in the long run, they could feel frustrated when circumstantial facts of the present contradicts what they know inside. When presented with new factual information, they're likely discarded. They will likely discard the information unless it can be shown to be consistent with other sources and be able to tie into coherent ideology.
Mm-hmm. It could be a, a few parts, the introverted intuition and also the introverted thinking as well,
Mm-hmm.
because NI is known for wanting to put everything into its NI box. So it's all the same pattern. And so let's say you have a blue box, but then you have the color purple, which is part blue and part red. And then it's like, oh, this purple, it can go in the blue box. And then everyone's like, I don't know if that's exactly blue. You're just kind of trying to fit everything into the pattern of what you already thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like this quality of pragmatism, I think it's TE in socionics, right?
Right.
It causing this shoving everything into this understanding, even if it may not completely fit, like shoving a square peg into a circle hole.
What it seems like, is it like for you, it dilutes the greater meaning of things?
It does, yeah, because you have this picture of the end state of things, then you kind of try to make everything fit into it. And then everyone's like, wait, that one fact may not fully fit. And they're like, no, look, if you twist it this way.
Right.
So you may not know that you're doing mental gymnastics sometimes to justify your point of view.
Right. Yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's kind of like when you're describing extrovert thinking, I could see that as its limitations for sure. Otherwise, the INFJ will feel quickly confused by conflicting and changing sources of data and not know which to choose. It is often the case that they could talk or write for a long time on their musings, what they think about the world, etc., without actually saying anything factually informative. They tend to strongly dislike feeling quizzed and will try to avoid situations where they may be shown by others to lack knowledge in an important area.
Yeah. So what they can say can sound very poetic and very beautiful, but it may not have any backing to it. And so for someone who very like values realism or maybe sensing higher up might go like, wow, this INFJ is making my stomach churn because they're spewing a lot of things without any facts to back it up. And it's like, don't do this to me. I don't need the TE to do this.
Understood. Okay. So INFJs particularly dislike humdrum practical tasks where they can be easily shown to be inept and incapable of doing things properly. When faced with such chores, they will feel the mental and physical strain, despairing over a messy house or unkept area that they are required to clean up but have no idea where to begin. They tend to be clumsy and not good at carrying out tasks efficiently and particularly well. So I understood like this is like when it comes to this function and its placement in the polar position here, for every type, that's like the vulnerable one here, right? For you, is this something that you could identify with?
Yeah, an INFJ's lack of TE can result in a lack of common sense. And so it's like, oh no, I feel inept and incapable of doing these basic things. And that can actually be a blind spot or an area you're not even aware of until someone else calls you out for it. And it's like, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do this in a way where people won't, like, they notice that you're lacking in this, and it's something that's not fun to focus on.
Right. Yeah, of course. Often they may seek distraction from their difficulty with carrying out procedures through appeals to humor, proclaiming their uselessness as an endearing trait. So should a person try to offer advice or instruction in how to do something better, they may be defensive or insulted, feeling that they are being condescended to or treated like an idiot. Additionally, will quickly tire of long, dry, factual explanations for how things work, finding such advice not only condescending, but also boring and unimportant in a greater scheme of things. They find it naturally hard to motivate themselves, and so little is more discouraging than them than being told that they're finally attempting this is being done wrong.
There can be an element of things being taken personally. So what it seems like is the INFJ might take their lack of TE as something that they can't change, and so they might take it as a personal offense because it's like, I can't do anything about this.
Yeah, and of course the polar function here is a very personal one for everyone. And any thoughts about like the overall description?
Yeah. So I think that if someone is an Enneagram 4 but may not be an INFJ, they could still on some capacity relate to this. And if they're an INFJ but they're not an Enneagram 4, they might relate to parts of this, but they might also have areas where they may not relate as much to it. And so you really need
these individual differences here.
Yeah. So having those two pieces would make someone ultra relate to this profile. And ultimately, like I said, the description of time for introverted intuition, I think, is brilliant. So I think that MBTI from the general community could take something out of Socionics from there. And so, yeah, I'm glad that you're also investigating the Socionics approach because they have many areas which MBTI has yet to cover too.
Thank you so much, Joyce. And be sure to check out our other video. We're going to be talking about relationships, as we mentioned earlier on. Thanks for being on, Joyce.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Leon. Take care.